Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a visit to a farm that had a helping hand in you having a farm share today by being one of the first places on the mainland to implement one as we visit Indian Line Farm.
And yes, we do talk about the name. We'll also explore a bit about song parody as we reflect on the life and catalog of the late Tom Lehrer.
But first, the movement of moths.
Down under.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Time once again for some kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer and the head of Kainaat Studios, Salman Hameed, here at your Amherst kitchen table. You were on the Cape last week. Luckily, because another astronomer became very famous. Thanks to the Coldplay cam. Oh my word. The name of that company, Astronomer.
He's not an astronomer.
I know, and the company's called Astronomer.
And the company's, how can you get a name like that? As for the company which has nothing to do with astronomy. It does data work or whatever. I found out about it on my Facebook feed. Yes, I'm old. I have Facebook. Because I have a lot of astronomy friends, and they were all posting about it because it went to them first. And I was like, oh, it must be an astronomer. But it turns out that the company is astronomer. For me, that is a scandal.
Also, you add Coldplay into the mix.
Oh my
Come
goodness.
on.
Look at the stars.
Yeah.
You know, they hired Chris Martin of Coldplay's ex-wife, Gwyneth Paltrow, to be their spokesperson now after all of this. It's actually kind of funny.
And probably it has the same amount of science as Gwyneth Paltrow does.
Exactly. And her goop.
Hi, I'm Gwyneth Paltrow. I've been hired on a very temporary basis to speak on behalf of the 300-plus employees at Astronomer. Astronomer has gotten a lot of questions over the last few days, and they wanted me to answer the most common ones. Yes, Astronomer is the best place to run Apache airflow.
The other big astronomy news is that there are some meteor showers coming up. In August, there's the Perseid meteor showers, but supposedly the moon is going to be so bright that it will be hard to see the Perseid. So according to an article from NPR, which also still needs your support, there is an opportunity tomorrow night, the 29th, and the 30th in particular, where the moon's going to be about 25% full, and you can see the convergence of two meteor showers at the same time, the Southern Delta Aquariids and the Alpha Capricornids, which will reach their peaks on the nights of July 29th through the 30th. So,
and remember, you don't need any telescope for this.
Yeah, it's just
you
super
don't
fun.
need even a binocular for that. Just go out, and you do need an open space and look for
get
it.
away from the lights.
Which our area is actually pretty good regarding that. And just go out and look at the sky.
Look at the stars.
Under normal circumstances, you have about 8 or so meteors per hour. And when there are meteor showers, of course, it ranges because these are the dust particles left over by comets. And so they enter the atmosphere. And so you have an increased, basically our Earth is passing through the debris left over by a comet. So you have an increased number of meteors in there. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's a lot more.
They are not the most magnificent scientific thing to see in the sky, but they're super fun to see. It's like a fireworks display that nature is providing for you that doesn't scare your dogs.
Plus, just imagine how many wishes you can make.
Oh, totally.
For restoring funding, for example, and things like that.
One more little NPR story. Listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me over the weekend, and they were making fun of our favorite person to make fun of, who's an astronomer, Avi Loeb, about calling everything he sees an alien spacecraft.
But Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard says it's probably a spaceship. His work is a breakthrough academic discovery that proves maybe tenure is not a good thing.
I love that his answer to most questions. Hey, what's this? Probably.
Well, here's the funny thing. This is the same guy who 3 years ago insisted another strange object was also a spacecraft, and it wasn't. But
Shocking.
It's good because he can reuse all those Welcome to Earth decorations he bought the first time.
And I was like, well done, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
And this is one of those, I've thought about bringing it up, sort of like to talk today about his claim that the new interstellar comet is also an alien spacecraft. But then I was like, why give more oxygen to something like this, which he has explicitly said himself is designed to get attention and money.
But he does get the funding for doing it. So I'll just say right here, NEPM's Jill Kaufman is an alien.
For NEPM News, I'm Jill Kaufman.
And I think,
So send funding our way.
but we have to be careful because if you say I am an alien, then I will soon be in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, we are going to talk about immigration.
That's true.
And the stars.
Yeah, so this is a fascinating story. There's an article that got published in Nature just this past week, and it was about these bogong moths. These are in Australia, and as it turns out, scientists have figured out that they migrate about 600 miles to another location. So they're born in one place, and then they start their migration in Australian spring, and they go 600 miles to caves over there in the Australian Alps. They spend the summer, and then in the fall, they travel back 600 miles to the place where they were born. They reproduce, and then they die. The question is, how do they know where to go for such a long distance? And so that's what people were trying to figure out. And the answer lies in the stars. Monty, you and I had talked a while back about the fact that dung beetles, there was a study about them in South Africa, that they use the light from the moon, or the polarized light from the moon, in order to travel in straight lines. So when they are making their dung, they have to go in straight lines, otherwise they would run into other dung beetles, and that usually ends up in fights and things like that.
I know that's what's happened to me.
So scientists actually figured out from Lund University that, well, they must use some kind of a method in order to figure out how to go in straight line, and they found out that it was the light from the moon. But they were still puzzled by it. What if there is no moon?
Because there's times where you don't see any moon in the sky.
And it turns out that they use the Milky Way. And that was a fascinating study. Another group from Lund University, they actually studied these bogong moths, Australian moths, and they suspected that in order to go these long distances, about 600 miles, they actually make use of the stars as well. I mean, to me, the interesting part is, yes, they use astronomy, which is really cool. But there is another component, that how do they figure out that they are using stars? These bogong moths, they used to be very common in Australia. They're important to the Aboriginal culture as well. They used to eat them, and apparently they taste like, they're nutty. So like almonds and things like that. And in fact, there was some microscopic remains that were found of these in a paste form, which was 2,000 years old.
Wow.
So it's actually a really interesting component. And there is a region or a mountain range, which is also called Mount Bogong, because of the moths, not the other way around.
Yeah, nice.
But because of their importance to that. But because of drought and other things, and including humans, they are now listed as threatened species, not fully endangered, but threatened species. So that is actually, we again have to think about these species have been doing these things for hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years, but now things are changing, and climate change is one of the things that is driving it, and also humans directly. So they captured these moths, and they tethered them, and they looked for how their direction is going to be, and gave them a simulator in front. They gave them the landmarks that are around it and the sky. Now, these are nocturnal, so they go at night. So they were trying to figure out, how do they find out where they are going? Do they see things, or are they sensing it through other things like magnetic fields? Now, of course, birds, they have nocturnal birds, they use Earth's magnetic field. They also use stars. Monarch butterflies actually go a long distance, but they use the sun.
A lot of them around right now. Maybe you got milkweed in your yard and you're experiencing them.
Right outside here, by the way. But they also use the Earth's magnetic field, so that's really crucial. So they put these moths in this simulator, and then they try to see where are they going, how are they responding to that. And it turns out, if you have the Earth's magnetic field, so they didn't change anything, they had this magnetic field in there. Without the stars, they could still use the Earth's magnetic field. But then they also put them in a chamber without magnetic field. And they tried to see, well, what happens to them? And they gave them simulated stars, in particular the Milky Way. And in the southern hemisphere, the Milky Way is quite prominent. And sure enough, they actually oriented themselves to north regarding the Milky Way's direction. As you would imagine, that a few months later, they'd come back to the same place, and so the Milky Way would be in a slightly different orientation. And that's what these scientists did, because in a simulator, you can actually change the orientation. It's like a planetarium, basically. You can change the orientation by 180 degrees of the Milky Way, and they would immediately change their direction of flying. So it was pretty clear that they are using the Milky Way. But to me, one of the cool things is they also simulated just random stars. So instead of the Milky Way, they put in stars of the same intensity distributed randomly in the sort of like simulated sky, and they got completely confused.
Oh.
What I like about this is such a cool study in order to think about how do you rule out different things. Avi Loeb, for example.
Could be aliens that are directing these bogon moths in Australia. That's what I'm going to leap to.
So there are ways to rule out different types of things. And so by removing the Earth's magnetic field, they knew that, okay, they could not be using the Earth's magnetic field. They are only using the stars. And then by changing the distribution of stars, they could tell that actually they use the Milky Way. And that's through evolution. Because when they start their journey, they go to a place where they've never been. But they've been programmed in that sense to actually go in that direction and to use the Milky Way. One of the big things regarding that is this is the first time that scientists have found that invertebrates use the stars to go for long navigational paths. This is interesting. I mean, they have tiny brain. I mean, the moths themselves have a 2-inch wingspan. And I was looking at some stuff and I found footage that these moths actually also invaded the closing ceremony of the Sydney Olympics in 2000. And I found there is this opera singer who was singing, a legendary opera singer, Australian, and there was a big moth land on her, up in there. So these moths, their brains are still tiny. They're the volume is 1/10 the size of a rice grain. But these scientists figured out when they had them in the simulator, they also had these tiny electrodes that they put into their brain and looked at how their neurons fire when they change the Milky Way direction. Sure enough, their neurons are firing as when they are using the Milky Way, and when you change it, and it again fires again. So I just love this type of stories because here you have this tiny, moths, which you go stupid moth going to the light and things like that. But here they are using their eyes to figure out where they are going. And they think that their eyes are not sophisticated enough. I shouldn't say sophisticated. They just have different eyes, okay? To see individual stars. But the Milky Way is big enough that they think that they use the Milky Way to figure out their path.
And when we say the Milky Way, we're all in the Milky Way. We're looking at the edge of the cloud of the Milky Way, which in western Massachusetts is not easy to see. But if you go into the hill towns away from the light, you can see it once in a while. The best place I've ever seen it with my own eyes is on Monhegan Island, off the coast of Maine, which is this dark sky island. And while we were staying there, I was with my family, and we'd be out there, and speaking of the meteor showers that you can see Tuesday night and Wednesday night this week, we would see shooting stars all the time. And they were, wow, wow. And I'm like, no, look at the Milky Way. It's right there. Well, it's not a cloud. It's stars. It's something we almost never get to see here. And the reason is light pollution. And, we have our friend James Lowenthal, who is an astronomer at Smith College, who's trying to work with the city of Northampton to diminish some light pollution. But this has greater implications than just our enjoyment of the night sky. If it gets too bright in Australia, these bogon moths are going to be bogon on the wrong trail.
But I should mention about when I was at the Cape last week, we actually went to the drive-in to see Superman.
Nice.
Good movie,
I liked it.
Yeah. And that particular night, sometimes in the ocean side when it's drier a little bit and you have really blue skies during the daytime and nighttime you have crisp skies. So at the drive-in, yes, the movie was going on. I was looking up in the sky because the Milky Way was really nicely lit up.
Wow.
And it was actually really good. You could actually see the darker spots in there, which I also love because that's where you are seeing dust blocking the light from the other stars in the back. So you can actually start seeing structure of our own galaxy, and we are looking into it. But the light pollution bit, one of the reasons why these bogon moths are endangered is because of lights as well, including the Olympic story that I told you where they ended up...
They got the torch, they're running with it, the moths all follow it along.
But was in Sydney.
Yeah.
And they're not supposed to go towards Sydney, but there are these huge lights over there. And so they see that as, this is the sign. I'm going to go towards the light. And so this is one of these issues that they get distracted by these human lights And
I mean, they are moths. They're famous for getting distracted by the human lights. Have you ever heard that Norm Macdonald joke?
No.
I will tell you after. It's so funny.
So these moths, one of the big, apart from drought, the other factor is light pollution. You have a brighter source of light coming from a city nearby. You go like, you know what? Hey, the brighter one, that's a better one. And and then of course they die out. Light pollution is a serious threat. And it's not just about the moths. I mean, the problem is that, of course, they are part of the ecosystem, so there are other species that depend on them. And so if one species die out, you are going to have, of course, a connection to other species as well. I think we should appreciate next time you see a moth and you go like, hey, you know, they look at the night sky, maybe not that particular one, but certainly the species of moths. And our sensitivity, our thinking about our environment in terms of lights, for example. So if you have lights that are just on, try to have a shade.
Yeah.
And if you don't need to have it on, don't switch it on.
Yeah, have the lights off at night.
Have it on a timer.
It's good for the pollinators. It's good for the birds. And if you run a giant space company, maybe don't launch thousands of satellites into the night sky. I'm glad you're bringing the internet to the world, but you're also messing up the way the Milky Way looks to these moths and others.
And also the species of astronomers, because they also cannot observe. I want to end on a positive note. Again, looking back at these moths, I mean, I think this is one of those stories where the scientists actually came up with the ideas to test those things, and I think that is great. But I should connect that story to New Mexico. I have seen sort of when I was used to go to the observatory over there in New Mexico, it's at Apache Point Observatory, and there would be telescope closures because of clouds, rain, and sometimes even dust storms. But I have encountered observatory closure because of moths. If you leave the observatory slit open, they would come in and jam the wheels that moves the dome and stuff like that. So we would have a closure in a season of moths where the telescope would be closed because of moths. And one time I was there, and New Mexico State, where I did my PhD, was about 2-hour drive from there. And so normally you would do the observing and then stay over there at nighttime and drive the next morning. And I went to the room and somebody had left the light on inside, and I opened the door and it was covered with moths. And I decided, I think, I'm tired. I'll take the risk of the mountain, and drive back rather than sleep with a sheet on with moths all around you.
Yeah.
Maybe after reading this paper, I would say, you know what? I look at them now as fellow astronomers.
The moth don't care when he sees the
Amen.
And now we're off to the Great Barrington Egremont border, where a farm with a long legacy is continuing to forge relationships with its community members, as we chat with farmer Elizabeth Keene as well as Dan Carr of Berkshire Agricultural Ventures at Indian Line Farm next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
It's time for another local hero spotlight. Berkshire's edition.
Woo!
We've crossed the mountain, and we are with Berkshire Agricultural Ventures and Dan Carr. Tell us what Berkshire Agricultural Ventures is all about if you've missed BAV or BAV on the show before.
We're a local not-for-profit based in Great Barrington, but we work with farmers all across Berkshire County, Massachusetts, Litchfield County, Connecticut, and Dutchess Columbia County in New York. And we try to help farmers either through low-interest loans or oftentimes through technical assistance. And that could be grant writing, that could be business plans, that could be marketing assistance.
All the stuff you don't think of when you think about what goes into farming. And it's good to have resources to help you along these things. You may just love farming but not know anything about marketing. So it's good to have the organizations like BAV, Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, that you can lean on. And Dan, you have taken us here in Great Barrington to Indian Line Farm.
We all at BAV think of Elizabeth Keene and the crew here at Indian Line Farm as sort of one of the primary mentor farms and sort of leading the pathway in a lot of ways. So that's why Elizabeth came to mind.
Well, hello, Elizabeth. Thanks for having us on your farm.
Hi, great. It's really awesome to be here.
It's really neat to be here just as the pickup for your CSA is starting, because just the crowd of eager and really excited folks and we got to see the produce before they even got in there, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, your CSA members, very punctual. And it's interesting being here during your CSA, your farm share pickup day, because the history of this farm has a lot to do with the history of farm shares in this country, at least. Can you tell us a little bit about that history?
Yeah, sure. I was just a youngster when in 1986 this farm was the site of the very first CSA in the country. There was a group of people who came together at the initiation of Jean van der Tijn. He had seen a model in Europe and he wanted to come back and see if he could create that here in the United States. He went to a number of farms before he ended up here and met Robin Van En, who was the owner of this property at that time. They discovered that they were kindred hearts, and they, with a group of people, created the textbook that now people use to do CSA.
A literal textbook?
They did, actually.
Because I saw a couple textbooks in your...
No, those are
recipe
books.
books.
Those are cookbooks. But,
in case you get kohlrabi and don't know what to do with it, Tony Dunn.
No, well, Robin later wrote a book called The Basic Guide to Community-Supported Agriculture, and it was literally just like a self-published book about how to create a CSA. And it's currently I don't know how many copies there are in the country, but there is one up the street at the Schumacher Center, which has Robin Van En's library. So we're grateful that some of those early archives are kept.
Has the farm been continuously doing a CSA pretty much since then?
No. The initiators of this project, they were here for 3 years. There was some few problems, and so there was that group kind of separated. There was another farm that was started in Housatonic, and this one did stay here. Diehards kept going for about 2 to 3 more years. And then from probably 92 to 97, there was not a community-supported agriculture farm here. And then when Al and I came here in 1997, we felt so green and so insecure at the idea of providing people food once a week, we decided that we would wait on that. And so we didn't really start anything until 1999.
What brought you here? How did you find your way to Indian Line Farm?
That involved the 1,000-mile bike tour. After I had...
And you're just tired. You're like, this place looks like a good place to take a rest. This beautiful tree we're under, perfect on a hot day to take...
You got off your bike and you were like, I live here now.
Home.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. But I was on a 1,000-mile bike tour after having lived and worked in Guatemala and southern Mexico for nearly 4 years. And this bike tour involved a speaking tour and biking in between.
Wait, you were doing the speaking and the biking?
I was doing the speaking and the biking.
What were you speaking about?
So I was speaking about my experience in Guatemala and southern Mexico, and we were trying to really just continue to educate U.S. citizens about what's happening in Central America and the struggles and plight of people who are struggling for justice and economic, security in their own countries, in many cases at the result of poor U.S. policies.
Good thing we got that problem solved.
Yeah. Obviously, it was a really important 4 years of my life in terms of transforming how I thought about the world. And it was that moment, leaving that, I really wanted to understand what it really felt like to work land and be connected to land. Having grown up in suburbia, Texas, that was not my experience. And so our first stop on this bike trip was Great Barrington.
Uh-huh.
And I reconnected there with a woman who had been on a couple delegations that I had led in Central America. And she said, hey, when you're done with the bike trip, why don't you come back? And that's when I ended up meeting the farmer David Engels, who had a CSA in Housatonic. And the following year, I was an apprentice at that farm, and then was here for almost a year, and very untimely death, the woman Robin Van En, who lived here. And then just like the parting of the Red Sea happened, and then Al and I find ourselves here at this farm.
What's different between what you grow now for your CSA and what you were growing then when you started it in 99?
I mean, Al and I thought after 6 months we knew what the heck we were doing, but turns out you don't know anything after 6 months. It's such a long learning experience, farming, and because all of the factors change every year in terms of weather and labor and so many things, equipment, I feel like every year is still learning. But initially we were basic. We grew tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and eggplant and peppers. Not very complicated. Later, we were able to build all this infrastructure, so we now have 3 hoop houses. We grow year round, and I can grow fennel, and I can grow kohlrabi, and I can grow escarole and frisee. A lot of things that I wouldn't want to grow a lot of, but one thing I think people love about our CSA is that they really do get a diversity of crops. We don't pack boxes for people. We let people really choose what they want. So we're feeding a lot of different palates.
We're with Elizabeth Keene at Indian Line Farm in Great Barrington and Dan Carr from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures. Indian Line has also benefited from the support that Berkshire Agricultural Ventures provides.
Absolutely. So a couple things come to mind. One, when we were looking to really do some major infrastructure upgrades, I went to BAV and sort of expressed some of my ideas that I had. And in the end, they helped us with a small grant to help with an 8-foot fence, which there aren't a lot of 8-foot fences around here, right here in Berkshire County. And so we have served as a model for some to understand how to do it. We did it ourselves. And then BAV was available to provide us a low interest loan when we did a major barn upgrade. And then most recently, I was part of a 3-year project that BAV sponsored on riparian buffers.
What is a riparian buffer?
I knew you were going to ask that. So a riparian buffer essentially is the area between any wetland or river or stream as it increases in altitude and becomes level ground. Often what happens, you see people literally till or build super close to these really important ecosystems, these rivers or these streams or wetlands. And on farms in particular, you ruin a lot of, especially if it's on a river, you lose a lot of land to erosion. You also lose critical habitat of bugs and insects and birds that can be really critical in the farmscape.
At the other end of that spectrum, Dan, you were mentioning how useful a resource Indian Line is to newer farmers, which I know BAV is constantly creating network between newer farmers and older farmers who are trying to create succession plans. Talk about the relationship of this farm where that network building is concerned.
Actually, I'll give a shout out to another local organization, Berkshire Grown, which is another local not-for-profit, and Berkshire Ag Ventures partnered together to help sponsor this peer network. It was one of those things where we had a facilitator and then provided the funds for the facilitator and then totally stepped back. I think that's a really important part of farms' growth, is just that sort of peer-to-peer collaboration, and just those gatherings, I think, are really a great information sharing resource.
How many acres are you farming here?
Yeah, we grow just about 5 acres, and then the greenhouses, each of the hoop houses, which is 30 by 96, they almost seem like an acre in and of themselves, the amount of work that goes into them. But yeah, intensively on about 5 acres, and then the farm is 17, and we have the rest of that is either in cover crop or is considered a buffer area, because we are adjacent
to... A riparian buffer?
Well, it is actually it is naturally a riparian buffer, thank goodness. We've sort of increased that a little bit with a couple projects that I was inspired by the riparian buffer workshop.
Talk about the name Indian Line Farm.
Yeah, right. It's something that we inherited. We did not create this name. The dairy farmers who came here in the early 1900s, the farm originally, its northerly border referred to in the deed to the northerly Indian line. And this Indian line came about in 1724 when the land that was taken/sold from the indigenous community here in Egremont to the white settlers, they retained this mile-wide strip. It had a southerly line and a northerly line, which allowed hunting and travel for the indigenous people from one river to another in New York into Mass. So many of the deeds all along this corridor refer to the Indian line. The farmers in the 1900s decided they really liked that name, and so they kept that as the name of the farm. When we first came here, we really spent a lot of time trying to decide, do we want to keep that name? And in the end, because of the historical nature of the farm and people's name association, we decided to keep it. And no one really questioned us about it for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
Until about 5 to 6 years ago, I started having some younger apprentices/employees And one really wrote me an impassioned letter that I should change the name.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's just something that we think about. It's a trigger for some people.
Yeah,
the name.
for sure. And yet the work that brought you to here was dealing with indigenous peoples in Guatemala and the displacement of people at the hands of colonizers and people overstepping their bounds. These are things that I'm sure maybe more than any other industry, the agricultural community is having to deal with on a day in and day out basis in this country, where there are people that are trying to escape the problems that sometimes the United States created in their land to come to work here and either have to do it extra legally, I'll call it, or have a hard time doing it. We met some of your workers in there.
Yeah.
How does this farm collaborate with the immigrant population?
Yeah, so we have a mixed crew, folks who live year round here and are sort of newer to farming, so some apprentices. And then I have some Ecuadorian employees who I've been very lucky to have more recently, like the last 2 to 3 years. They have just been an outstanding addition to the farm. Many of them literally grew up doing work in the country, agricultural work. One gentleman, literally from the age he was 14, he worked in the palm industry. He told me that the work here is way easier than what he was doing in Ecuador. We have also been struggling with finding local labor because the housing market is so complicated, and those are all really complicated issues. But we love our crew. And I love the knowledge that they bring to me about their experience with agriculture. I also love being able to, speak Spanish, try to teach English as we're going along. It feels it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Intercambio. More coming up at Indian Line Farm. We discover how the CSA framework exists in other parts of the globe, get a tour of the grounds they're farming, and hear a little of what harvest might look like for farmer Elizabeth Keene in the future.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering skylights, siding, gutters, and doors. WindowWorldOfWesternMA.com. We're with Elizabeth Keene at Indian Line Farm in Great Barrington and Dan Carr from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures. We mentioned that Indian Line Farm here was the first farm in the U.S. to bring the farm share CSA, community supported agriculture concept to the United States. Now it seems like very, very many farms have incorporated this model. Is this the predominant model with the farms that you work with Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, Dan?
I would say not really. There's such a variety of different farm models, and I would say that in Berkshire County we have quite a lot of livestock farms because of the landscape. There are some livestock farms that offer CSA shares in one form or another, but there's such a variety. I wouldn't say that it's predominantly just CSA models.
Mm-hmm. When I talk about, say, Jean van der Tijn, who came from Europe, this concept of bringing agriculture directly from a consumer to the farmer. There are also roots in the South. There's also an example in China. It's interesting how when the need arises, certain things percolate up based on different cultures, different needs, different places. So we do know community-supported agriculture came from here in that name, that acronym. We have the notes that they wrote about it during the 80s. They actually kept notes.
Yeah, and I think, we don't explain this every time we talk to a CSA farm, but it's like you as a community member and consumer pay the farmer up front to give them a riparian buffer. Just a regular buffer of insurance to no matter what's going to happen for that.
It's to the river of money that they need to maintain the farm.
Right, and if the river overflows the banks, you might get less. Right. Well, no, you might get less crops that season, but you've already paid in advance, and it's basically a vote of confidence with your money in the work of this farm and agriculture, local agriculture in general.
Yeah, and in terms of the concept sprouting up in other places, it's like the Raid and Dread.
Yes,
sometimes you just end up. They're the same movie, but they started in different places.
Both characters are members of law enforcement and are suiting up for what they think will be a regular day on the job.
One of the things that also over the years I think think when you've been doing anything over 20 years, like there's always this desire to how to make it still lively, still exciting, still learning. So one of the things I got kind of inspired about by this riparian buffer class was that I was like, what can I grow into my older years? We have this buffer area, and I just planted like 300 winterberry bushes, which have this really beautiful stem with red berries in the early winter. And I'm really excited about having those come to fruition at some point. And I'm looking at a lot of different kinds of willows for either basket making or cut flowers. And so I'm looking at those things too. They're also heavier and you don't have to bend over as much. So when I get to the point in my life where I don't want to do any of those things, I will have this resource.
Some people move to a one-story house.
Yes.
You grow winterberries and willow.
Exactly.
I love that idea.
Knowing that program came from a grant and knowing that you have other programs that are funded in that way for the education of folks doing agriculture, are you worried about being able to maintain those, considering the cuts that have recently gone through for everybody?
Yeah, and we've seen that. We've seen farmers lose REAP funding, REAP being renewable energy projects. We've heard stories from a lot of different farmers. It's been an evolving process. We've seen some things get frozen and then get unfrozen later after it goes through the process. So we remain hopeful and we remain reliant on constituents talking to their representatives. That really does make a big difference.
And not unlike public media that gets some of these federal funds that can go away, it's the public that really keeps the public in public media and their support. Not unlike the farm shares where people say we want local agriculture, we want things to be grown where we live. We're going to give you our money up front, not knowing what this growing season is going to be like, to support the farmers. And a lot of that work in this country began right here at this farm.
I mean, the impact of that is beyond economic. Buying your food locally lessens your carbon emissions. It lessens the impact on the environment, and societally also has a lot of impact. Buying your food locally is much more than just supporting your local farmer. When you were talking about Pick Your Own when we got here, when did Pick Your Own become a part of your farm, or was it always a part of your farm?
No, it wasn't for a long time because, this is a land trust, but it wasn't sort of ours. We didn't have this long-term lease for quite a number of years. And this farm was a complete disaster when we got here. So it took us a long time, many years, like 5 years, before we let anyone delve anywhere beyond the parking lot. And that increasingly has become a very big part of what we do. We love to make our farm be beautiful. People love that. They love taking home a bouquet flower. They love picking cherry tomatoes. For some people, I think it's a chore and they'll never go down there, even though it's included in the share. But for other people, it really is a special moment to see, oh, wow, this is the farm. This is what Elizabeth and her crew are doing. And they appreciate it.
What is Jug End Road? Where does that name come from?
Jug End Road. So there is a Jug End reservation. If we want to walk down, I can point out what Jug End is, but there's many different understandings that maybe the word came from a German word. It's also, if you look at it, some people say it looks like a jug on its side.
And then there's Bish Bash, which is not far from here too.
Bish Bash.
I have
Bish Bash.
no idea the history of it.
Bish Bash is a wrestler name.
It does sound like that, but it's definitely a place that I've not yet gone to that my wife is always like, can one of these days, can we go to Bish Bash?
It's so close. You're right here. You should definitely go.
I can't go right now or I will be in big trouble at home. What a beautiful view.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the Jug End right there.
That little hill?
That hill.
Which is kind of a mountain. It's a Berkshire.
Yeah.
I'll call it a Berkshire.
I get it.
Kind of looks like a jug end, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe the end is over here. I don't know.
It kind of looks like it's a jug on its side.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a milk carton that's been tipped over.
So again, I'm looking at these future years on how I might be able to do ornamental cuts and also do good things for the pollinators in the area. So we just planted probably 200 different plants down there in that buffer area, and then where all these ribbons are behind you. And the whole point was to be where you see the pink ribbons. Those are supposed to be, hopefully this will be an example of to other farms how you can incorporate productive material with also pollinator / native
And this is
plants.
the aforementioned riparian buffer?
Yeah, right. Well, yes, all of that. So when I first started thinking about the project, we realized I already have a buffer. All those bushes are the buffer for the wetland that is closer to all those trees. So I'm just extending it in a little bit.
What are these things on posts right here?
These are all chestnut trees. We have a friend who one of his life's work is to produce chestnut trees. So he's like, hey, can I plant some chestnut trees? I was like, yeah, sure, plant them here. His name is Chris Wiltshire. I think he kind of does it on his own.
Huh. We've talked to a bunch of chestnut revivalists.
So he planted them, and I couldn't possibly have imagined 30 years down the road, but those trees are going to be huge.
Yeah, we're at the beginning of the chestnut renaissance.
Yeah. So this is this whole section is our U-pick garden, and we have flowers, herbs, green beans, and then these are all our hoop houses where we have early tomatoes and cucumbers. And we grow a lot of cut basil for a couple stores. Our raspberries are just coming in. I forgot to write that on the U-pick board.
We're helping.
Yes, you are reminding me. I need to. Yeah, look, it's so exciting.
The monarchs have returned.
It's fun to think about where the eggs were.
They went on as long a journey as your bike ride.
Yes, probably longer. This is like a non sequitur. But speaking of funds, that we worked with NRCS, the National Resources Conservation Service. They helped us with design and implementation of a new water project, and we were very lucky because its completion was this year that the rest of the funds did not fall under any of the funds that were cut. So we were just feeling for our farming friends who that was the case, had projects with NRCS that got cut. But this is the first year that these underground spigots that come from these two 30-foot wells that each produce 50 gallons a minute, which is just unheard of. They helped us find it. It was so amazing.
Did they divine?
No, there was no divination. It was.
People still do that.
I know it's true.
With the stick?
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that makes me witchcraft probably still real.
This was geological research that he did. He essentially said, you have water here. And we've known that. 2 feet down, there's groundwater that's flowing into this wetland area. But we haven't been able to access it in large quantities. And so we did this really amazing project, 30-foot wells, and then 4-inch perforated pipes. And then we did this whole process of plunging, like a toilet plunger, and then pumping the water out until it created this whole little aquifer underground. And it was literally miraculous. Yeah. I mean, any farmer who gets 100 gallons a minute out of your total wells is just in heaven.
Yeah.
So it's really transformed what's possible for us. I don't care about drought.
It's good to highlight all the good work that NRCS does because
amazing.
As much as the EQIP grants and things like that have been cut, it's more the staff that's been seeing the biggest cuts. Right. And that's really been brutal.
One of the gentlemen who we worked for in the final stages of this project, he got cut. And I was calling in the spring, looking for technical assistance. And he's like, I'm not supposed to talk to you. And thankfully he got reinstated.
Managed to dodge that bullet.
Yes, he did. But it was a bummer. I mean, these really qualified people who weren't available to help.
Thanks so much for taking time with us, Dan and Elizabeth, here at this beautiful Indian Line farm. Are we in Great Barrington, though, or are we in Egremont?
Good question. So the mailing address is Great Barrington, but you are in South Egremont.
That's what I thought. I was like, there's too much Egremont going on around here.
I've seen towers fall.
Thanks again to Elizabeth Keene from Indian Line Farm, as well as Dan Carr from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures.
And this music is from another Keene, Billy Keene, who's playing at the Egremont Barn in South Egremont next Friday, the 8th.
Connected with this segment, we got the following email this morning. Hello. I love your show and your banter. Aw, thanks. And I'm so excited about today's topic. I thought I might be one of the only humans who knew Indian Line Farm was the first mainland CSA in the U.S., started in 1985 when my mom, R.I.P. to an amazing woman, and her boyfriend Hugh Ratcliffe, who lives in France these days, I think, moved to the Berkshires from their Waldorf Haven in Spring Valley, New York, after learning about Robin Van N., R.I.P. to another amazing pioneer, and her work.
The email continues. They dedicated their lives to working with Robin to start the CSA. I remember countless days of them studying plants and biodynamic methods, the super Rudolf Steiner version of organic farming, Steinerized farming as we called it, in their plant study groups, and many nights under the just right constellations with Robin, my mom, Nancy, and Hugh, stirring their special manure formula to form a funnel to capture specific stellar energy to then spread over the plants.
Which is followed by a pile of emojis. There were many other nights like it, and every winter Hugh went to Hawaii to a Waldorf community there where CSAs had already started in some form, and he'd farm all winter and bring back new ideas and techniques. Thanks for covering this unique bit of Western Mass history that's gone way beyond the Berkshires and biodynamics. Best, Lily. Thanks so much for that email, Lily. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Lily. And yeah, we talk sometimes about biodynamic farming when it comes to winemaking as well. The idea of taking the manure and putting it in like a sheep's or cow horn in your pasture. And I don't know what our astronomer, Mr. Universe, would think about gathering the stellar energy that way, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Coming up, we're going to talk about the late, great satirist and musician Tom Lehrer.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
All the world seems in tune on a spring afternoon when we're poisoning pigeons in the park. Every Sunday you'll see my sweetheart and me as we poison the pigeons in the park.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. That is the late, great Tom Lehrer, who in the Boston Globe from today has a Critic's Notebooks column by Don Aucoin saying Tom Lehrer's influence on political satire is still playing out today. Brief though his career as an entertainer was, Tom Lehrer inscribed his signature on a brainy, no-holds-barred brand of political and social satire whose influence could be discerned decades later in the likes of Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, Jon Stewart, Trevor Noah, and Samantha Bee.
I mean, and beyond, because, clearly we're talking about satire in a musical medium, which has long-lasting ripples, too, from Weird Al, who I just saw last week, to, Flight of the Conchords, into nerdcore, if we're getting really, specific about it. But, comedy and music worked with him in a way that I think really had, lasting result and effect.
Yes, and he did pass away Saturday in Cambridge, Mass. at the age of 97.
In the 70s, when he basically stopped being really inspired, he went back to teaching math.
Well, Weird Al Yankovic, who's one of my great heroes, the first big act I ever saw live open up for the Monkees in 1987, posted yesterday, "My last living musical hero is still my hero, but unfortunately no longer living. Rest in peace to the great Mr. Tom Lehrer."
Indeed. There are so many cool things that he did musically, including a physics musical, which has a lot of classical music bases with words written on top of them. Absolutely fantastic. I think we have a clip of one of those. That would be the questions one. Yeah, from the last song in that particular musical, which is Any Questions.
If there are none, then I am done, and I can bid you all good day, but there's no reason I should stay here. Since I said all I have to say here. If there are none, then I am done. I wish you luck, me examination. And so, my friends, I bid you all goodbye. I hope you like this course as much as I. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye to one and all. I say goodbye. Just one more thing, and do not laugh. I hope you'll take the second half. Physics, 11 people. There's no reason I should say. He asked if there are questions. Holy smoke, if I got questions. I got a ton, and every one would take him half a day to do, but there's no reason I should say.
It goes on, and it's fantastic. It's hard to find recordings of it, but one of the other cool things that he did is post a pile of his music, basically royalty-free for you to use however you want to through his website. He gave up the rights to a bunch of his music so that other people could perform it and use it.
Very teacherly of him.
Very teacherly of him. Although there is definitely a disclaimer on that site that says, hey, this is not going to last for super long, so you might as well use it while you're able to before it all goes away.
The Tom Lehrer song that I was most familiar with, because I'm a huge Weird Al guy, huge Flight of the Conchords guy. I'd heard of Tom Lehrer, but was not a devotee. But the one I know the best is his Elements.
There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium, europium, zirconium, lutetium, vanadium, and lanthanum, and osmium, and astatine.
I'm going to make my kids memorize this. I'll say that parody music is something that's huge for me. I came up with a song for my kids to memorize the presidents of the United States in order. The very first year I did a radio show, I did a parody song every single week on the show, which we're not going to play a clip of right now, but I will. Maybe we'll go out with it. Phil Bishop, our engineer, wants to do it. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute.
Satirical songs are literally my family's love language. Like, that is what we do with and for each other all of the time. So, and this was no small part of it. And those songs getting played on, like, Dr. Demento, so we had exposure to them, and, like, Spike Jones and Weird Al, like, we owe a lot to it.
Yeah, and I think of the Animaniacs, who have, like, the states in their capitals, a song that they've come up with, and the countries of the world. Taking those parody songs and using them for learning are really important. From the sheer parody end of things, there's this family called the Holderness family that especially during the pandemic, as a family, would come up and sing these parody songs about very funny things about, like not that menopause is funny, but turning menopause into something funny and turning, being an introvert into something funny and musical. There's also this guy, Jesse Wells, who just played in Newport over the weekend. He just came out with a song after the Corporation for Public Broadcasting was defunded, singing about PBS. And I will also mention that the mayor of Northampton's husband, Bill Scher, has a parody music album under the name John Cougarstein. Now, the mayor of Northampton tried to get me a link to his album. I do own it on CD. I didn't bring it with me. But know that out there in the world, Bill Scher, who is a political pundit, has a John Cougarstein parody hat that he wears, and it is literally a cowboy hat.
And there's some wordplay in the Vatican Rag by Tom Lehrer that I think is just like genius. So, yeah.
Do you want to go out with that? And then Phil Bishop will have to listen to my parody music on his personal time. Which one, please?
We can put it as a bonus on the podcast.
I'll say that I got Mayor Claire Higgins to sing on it and Dar Williams. So I was pretty proud of it. But we'll end with Tom Lehrer as we're paying tribute to that legend who passed away at age 97 in Cambridge, Mass. over the weekend.
Indeed. On the next Fabulous 413, we head to North Adams, where intrepid young classically trained ingenues get to explore new sounds and ensembles.
Bang on a Can Loud Weekend begins on the 31st, and we'll spend the day with the composers, performers, and founders of this celebration.
Including hearing the work that will close the festival, Shelter.
We'll talk with David Lang and Julia Wolf of the original Bang on a Can ensemble.
And hear Jason Truding of So Percussion. Awesome stuff.
We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
Playing it safer, drink the wine and chew the wafer. 2, 4, 6, 8. Time to transubstantiate. So get down upon your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Make a cross on your abdomen. When in Rome, do like a Roman. Ave Maria, gee, it's good to see you. Getting ecstatic and sort of dramatic and doing the Vatican